All right, welcome back to King Arthur and the Round Table. Now we're on chapter 18, and this chapter is on Sir Meliagraunce. Although Sir Lancelot rescued the queen in the affair of the poisoned apple, the attempt to dishonor her had been made, and might be made again. The queen was beautiful, and there were plenty of bad or reckless knights who would not hesitate to take a chance to kidnap her, if Sir Lancelot was elsewhere at the time. Sir Meliagraunce, who was a coward, thought he was in love with the queen for a long time. His love was of the kidnapping, and not the knightly kind. And he waited for a chance when Sir Lancelot was away. Now it came on May Day. The court was in London. The queen arranged a party to ride out into the woods and fields around Westminster. Sir Lancelot was at council with the king and could not come, so the queen went out without him. She was accompanied by 10 knights and 10 ladies. Each knight had a squire and 2 servants. All were unarmed, wearing green silk for May Day and carrying one light court sword. And carrying only light court swords. They were more for decoration than, protecting yourself. Sir Meliagraunce lived in a castle 7 miles from Westminster, and there he had many men-at-arms and archers. When the queen was out with all her knights, out of the wood came Sir Meliagraunce with 200 men, all prepared for fighting. He ordered the queen and her knights to halt, meaning to stop. "Traitor knight," said the queen, "what are you thinking of? Will you bring shame on yourself? Remember, you are a knight of the Round Table. Now think before you shame all knighthood and yourself and me." "Well, this fine talk is all very well," replied Sir Meliagraunce. "Madam, I have loved you many a year, and never until now could I get you at such a disadvantage. Therefore, I will take you as I find you." Now at this rude speech, the queen's knights fell on Sir Meliagraunce and his men without armor and with no hope of success. They fought with such skill that they killed 40 of the enemy before they themselves were all disabled. When the queen saw that they were wounded and surrounded, she cried to Sir Meliagraunce that she would yield to him on condition that her knights were spared and were brought with her and lodged wherever she was lodged. Sir Meliagraunce gave way, though he had meant to kill them all and take only the queen. But time was passing, and he was afraid some hidden watcher in the woods might send a message to Sir Lancelot. He meant to be safe inside his castle wall before that happened. Now, meanwhile, the queen outwitted him, which means she outsmarted him. While the wounded men were being helped onto horses, the queen had a word with a young page, a boy of 12, so he's only 12 years old, who rode a fast, fresh pony. "When you see a chance," she said, "slip away and take this ring to Sir Lancelot, and pray him as he loves me to rescue me, and don't spare your horse," meaning get on your horse as soon as you get a chance and ride as fast as you can. Not taking care to spare your horse, meaning even if it kills your horse, go as fast as you can. The boy was on fire with pride and determination and took the first chance that came. When the big horses were crowding across a little stream and he had to wait until they were over, he turned his pony and spurred down a hedge path. So a hedge would be like thick underbrush. And though some of Meliagraunce's men chased him, he got away. Sir Meliagraunce knew what that meant. Sir Lancelot would arrive. He hurried the queen and the knights into the castle and sent 30 archers to ambush Sir Lancelot, telling them to shoot, especially at his horse, for he had no faith that even 30 of them could overcome the great knight himself. The queen insisted on having the 10 wounded knights in her apartments, where she and her ladies looked after them. Shut out, Sir Meliagraunce cursed and paced about the castle, preparing for the dreaded arrival of the queen's champion. The page made his way safely out of the woods and galloped his pony at full speed along the open road to Westminster. The Queen's ring won him instant admission to the palace and Sir Lancelot's apartments. The great knight was just returning from the king's council. At the words, "A page with the Queen's ring," he halted and summoned the boy. So somebody has come and told him that there's this boy here who has the Queen's ring. So he has stopped immediately and said, "Bring the boy to me." He looked closely at the ring, and as he heard the story, his color changed and one of his rare angers came over him. There was no more talking then. His armor was brought, his horse prepared, and a message sent to Sir Lavaine to follow him. Within the hour, he was going as hard as the heavy charger would carry him down the road to the woods. It had not occurred to him to take a troop of knights with him. He meant to settle this alone. Coming down to the river at Westminster, he met a group of pack horses and drivers, taking all the road over the bridge. So he rode his horse straight down the bank into the water and swam across. From there, he made straight for the place where he knew the Queen had gone. Trampled earth showed the battleground, and soon he was riding hard on the tracks of the company going back to the castle. Suddenly, the men in ambush sprang out on him and shot his horse down. Raging, Sir Lancelot came at them on foot with his huge sword. Now, they all turned and ran. That's how fearsome Sir Lancelot was. He was well respected and feared by everyone. They all knew he was the greatest knight. And now he's the greatest knight that's alive, right? Because his son, Sir Galahad, who was also said to be the greatest knight in the world, is now dead. So it's left to just Sir Lancelot. Sir Lancelot tramped on over ditches and through wet fields in his heavy armor, getting more and more angry. He heard the welcome sound of a horse, and a woodman's cart came down the path with 2 carters in it. It was one of the rules of etiquette that no knight could ride in a cart. Sir Lancelot was too angry to care. He asked the carters if they would drive him to the castle, 2 miles off. Well, the driver refused. Sir Lancelot scrambled into the cart and gave the man such a blow with his mailed fist that he fell over backwards, dead. Sir Lancelot just accidentally killed him because a mailed fist, their armor would have covered even their hands. Only the underside of their hand was soft enough to really squeeze onto things. The outside were layers on layers of metal. So his mailed fist, and it would have had chainmail. So probably what you would have actually seen would have been his chainmail on his fingertips. So he's now hit this man so hard that he's killed him. The queen and her ladies, the other carter hastily said that he would drive the knight wherever he wanted, and so Sir Lancelot came to the castle. The queen and her ladies were sitting restlessly in a bay window. A bay window kind of comes out, refusing all conversation with Sir Meliagraunce and his men, watching and waiting for Sir Lancelot. Up the winding approach from the woods to the castle gates came a horse and a cart, and as they watched it, the queen gave a cry, for she saw, standing up in the cart, an armed knight. She sprang up, and her ladies pressed to the window. "How lucky am I that he is my friend," she cried. Sir Lancelot arrived, alone at the castle gate. Lifting his visor, he roared in a voice that rang over the wall and in all the windows. "Where are you, false Meliagraunce? Come out, you traitor, you and all your gang, for I am here, Sir Lancelot du Lac, to fight with you all. He seized the little gate and hurled it back on the porter who was hurrying down to lock it, and struck the man under the ear so that he broke his neck and killed him. He stepped into the archway and then into the courtyard, and everyone hid from him and kept dead quiet. He held the entire castle at bay. You have to think, guys, this is a man who has desperately loved the queen pretty much his entire adult life, right? And he knows that this other knight has deceived her and kidnapped her, and he's extremely angry about it. Sir Meliagraunce was terrified. He ran to the queen while Sir Lancelot raged in the courtyard and begged her to save him from Sir Lancelot. The queen went swiftly down the winding stairs and out into the courtyard and took Sir Lancelot by both hands. He was still shouting for the traitor knight to come out and face him. The queen laughed gently at him, thanked him for his coming, and said, "The knight is sorely regretting this entire misadventure that he has embarked on." Sir Lancelot, still half angry about his dead horse, answered gruffly, "Madam, if I had known you and made up with him so easily, I wouldn't have made such haste to get to you." Now the queen held his arm and smiled at him. "Why do you say that? Are you sorry you have done so well? You know I never made up with him because I liked him, but to stop a brawl and a scandal." "Madam, no one except my Lord King Arthur and you could stop me from killing Sir Meliagraunce before I go away." "Oh, I know that well," she answered gently. "You shall have everything arranged as you decide." So Sir Lancelot's anger died, and he smiled back at her. "Madam, so long as you are pleased, it pleases me." And they went upstairs together to confront Sir Meliagraunce. Trial by battle was arranged 8 days from then, in the fields beside Westminster. Sir Meliagraunce withdrew, heavy-hearted, bent on getting out of it by one means or another. Sir Lancelot went to talk to the 10 wounded knights, and after that everyone settled down to spend the day resting and looking after the sick men. The next day they would all return to Westminster. Sir Meliagraunce invited Sir Lancelot to inspect the castle. He had made some arrangements beforehand, and on the tour Sir Lancelot stepped on a trapdoor and fell into a deep cellar into a pile of straw. Now Sir Meliagraunce fastened the trapdoor and went back to his rooms. When inquiry was made, meaning when they asked questions, he professed or claimed to know nothing of the visitors' whereabouts, and everyone thought that Sir Lancelot had suddenly left the castle and gone back to Westminster. Now he often made these unexpected departures and arrivals, which were a safeguard in times of danger. Meantime, Sir Lavaine arrived, and the next morning he escorted the queen and her party back to court. When they arrived, the queen was surprised not to find Sir Lancelot, but everyone just assumed that he was on some business of his own. The next day, Sir Meliagraunce appeared, not looking at all like a man who was due to fight Sir Lancelot in a week. He was almost careless about his behavior to the queen, and swaggered about in a way that amazed everyone. He kept this up day after day until the queen became uneasy. She spoke to several knights, and everyone agreed that Sir Meliagraunce's behavior, combined with Sir Lancelot's absence, looked as if some mischief had been worked. Sir Lavaine asked for the privilege of fighting instead of the champion, if by any evil chance it should be necessary. The king granted it, saying he was sure some treachery had been done. All this time Sir Lancelot was shut up in the dark dungeon without sight of day. Food and drink were brought to him by the wife of one of the castle officers, who tried, like all women who came in contact with Sir Lancelot, to make him unfaithful to his vow to the queen. She offered to set him free if he would become her knight. Politely, but persistently, Sir Launcelot refused. He knew his vow represented the ideal of honor and knighthood. If he would break his vow to the queen in order to fight for her, his fighting for her would have no truth. On the morning of the battle day, the lady's heart gave way. She knew that if she kept Sir Launcelot prisoner, he would hate her forever. And if she let him free, in time he would at least remember her with goodwill for that. So Sir Launcelot escaped in the nick of time, meaning just when he needed to. The heralds were sounding, and Sir Lavaine was ready at the end of the ground. When there was a commotion in the crowd and the great horse and rider came thundering onto the field, roars went up and he was recognized. Saluting the king, he told everyone in a loud voice how Sir Meliagraunce had trapped him. The cheering changed to howls and hisses, and the crowd prepared for another of Sir Launcelot's victories. But Sir Meliagraunce was a trickster to the last. The heralds blew, the knights withdrew to their ends of the lists. Lances were poised, the trumpet sounded, and they charged. Sir Meliagraunce slid off his horse, and Sir Launcelot dismounted and approached sword in hand. But Sir Meliagraunce refused to fight. He yielded himself in the most groveling language that chivalry allowed, and called on Sir Launcelot as a fellow knight of the Round Table not to kill him. He had lost all the privileges of knighthood by kidnapping the queen and trapping Sir Launcelot, and yet he claimed them now to save himself. Sir Launcelot hesitated. He could not bring himself to kill a man who crawled on the ground and would not get up and fight. But if he let him go, he knew he would be treacherous again. "Get up, man," he exclaimed, "and fight." "Not I," replied Sir Meliagraunce, who was trading on Sir Launcelot's chivalry and knew he was safe while he refused to fight. "I will never get up until you agree that I have surrendered." "Well, I will make you an offer," said Sir Launcelot. "I will take my helmet off and all the armor down my left side, and I will have my left arm tied behind me, and I will fight you like that." Sir Meliagraunce stood up. Such a handicap had never been heard of. "My lord King Arthur," he shouted, "you heard this offer. Remember it, because I am going to accept it. Have him disarmed and bound according to his offer." Well, the king spoke uneasily to his friend. "You cannot mean that, Sir Launcelot. You spoke in heat. You cannot keep such terms." "I will, my lord, and I never go back on my word." Everyone's heart sank at this disarming began. Protest arose all around the field, and the king and queen fell silent. Only the enemies of the king, Sir Mordred and Sir Agravaine, and the evil men who plotted with them, leaned forward and suddenly drew breath. If Lancelot were killed, who knew what chance for evil might open in the kingdom? Sir Launcelot was ready. His head, neck, half his body, and his left leg were bare, and his arm was tied behind him. Most men could not even lift their swords with only one hand, still less use them. Sir Launcelot knew the odds against him were so heavy that the first encounter would settle it. He was not afraid. Sir Meliagraunce rushed in. Sir Launcelot sprang aside, swinging up as he leaped. And there was a crash. Sir Launcelot stood waiting to be unbound, and men dragged Sir Meliagraunce off the field. His head and helmet were split in two. Let's read that again. Okay, Sir Launcelot was ready. His head, neck, half his body, and his left leg were bare. His arm was tied behind him. Most men could not even lift their swords with only one hand, still less use them. Sir Launcelot knew the odds were against him, so heavy that the first encounter could settle it. But he was not afraid. Sir Meliagraunce rushed in. Sir Launcelot sprang aside, swinging as he leaped. And then there was a crash. And in this crash, Sir Meliagraunce's head and his helmet split in two. Roar upon roar went up from the crowd. Sir Mordred and Sir Agravain sat back and waited for another day, meaning that they still have plans for their revenge. All right, we're going to leave off with this chapter.